All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, we thought maybe no one would come since it's spring finals week, so we're very happy to see you all here. Our webinar today is titled Checking In So Our Students Don't Check Out. I am Summer Serpas, English professor at Irvine Valley College and also the assistant director of CAP. We're also here with Rachel Polakoski, math professor at Cuyamaca College, and Ryan Sullivan, English professor at Mount San Jacinto College. And we have Rebecca Kaminsky monitoring the chat and helping us answer questions and let people in. I also want to say thank you to Lynn Serwin, from English professor from Cerritos College, and Michelle Beard, math professor from Ventura College, who also provided a lot of input in the planning of this webinar and working through this semester. Okay, so this kind of started last year in 2022 when the College Transition Collaborative released a study of faculty mindsets at 9 California community colleges. And what they discovered when they were doing this study was that while California community college faculty expressed having a growth mindset about their students, growth mindset beliefs about their students, there was often a misalignment between what faculty and counselors believe and the mindset messages students are receiving. So faculty, when they interviewed faculty, they expressed that they believe their students can succeed. They have a growth mindset. When they asked the same students in those classes, those students did not have that perception about their instructors. So at CAP, we kind of started to think about the different ways in which we could address this mismatch. How do we figure out what our students are thinking in our class, and how can we help align our mindset with what they perceive from us? So we got together a small group of California Community College English and math faculty to try out different tools and discuss the various ways in which we can check in with our students so that we can get more information on what they are perceiving from us. In addition to giving us feedback on student experience, checking in with our students can help us convey care about students as individuals, their experiences, and their learning. It can help build classroom community and belonging. It can increase rapport and connection between student and instructor. It can help students feel seen, heard, and valued. And it can increase engagement, self-efficacy, and learning. So just the act of checking in lets our students know that we care and that we want to hear from them and hear about their experience in the class. And then when we use that feedback that they give us, it becomes an even more powerful tool for us in the classroom. So as we kind of talked with the different instructors and talked about how they check in with their students, we kind of figured out this cycle of checking in. So a check-in is an intentional routine that is quick, it can be anonymous, and it is clearly designed to get student feedback. There's many different ways to do that, and we will talk about some of those today. We also have a publication that we just released that will share a lot of these different check-in tools. So we'll go over a few of them today, and then we'll be sharing out that publication with you at the end that has a lot of different tools that you can use. Why we check in with our students. When the check-in is a regular feature of the student's classroom experience, it can foster a sense of belonging, support self-efficacy, increase engagement, and create an environment that is more conducive to learning. How do we do this? By matching check-in tools to instructor goals, faculty can get immediate feedback from students to help them make classroom pedagogy and curricular decisions, improve student learning and experience, convey care and support to their students, and monitor student well-being and build classroom community. So why are we here today? We're going to be providing an overview of the check-in cycle. We're going to share 3 examples of check-in routines used by English and math faculty. So I'll be sharing mine, and Rachel and Ryan will share their check-in routines. And we'll also be exploring ideas for a community of practice that allows faculty to build a routine of checking in with their students together. Okay, so the check-in cycle. From the instructor's perspective, the check-in can be viewed as an inquiry cycle with 4 components. So first, we're going to be setting a goal. What do we want to learn from our students? What is our goal in using this check-in? We're going to choose the check-in tool. How will we check in with our students? What's the mechanism we're going to use to do that? We need to support our students to participate. So how can we get feedback from the highest number of students? And arguably, most importantly, we need to close the loop. So we need to follow up with our students when we get that information from them. So when you're setting a goal, you're determining what you want to learn from your class when checking in. So this can be related to many different aspects of the course. You might be checking in to make sure your students are learning and understanding course content. You might be checking in about student behavior you noticed, so why students are not submitting homework, for example, or you might be checking in on student well-being, or it might be a combination of the 3. So there's many different reasons why we might check in with our students, and we really want to think that through before we start in on a check-in routine with our students. So it's important to consider, what am I trying to learn about or from my students? How will my students benefit from participating in the check-in? And set those goals ahead of time. And they might change throughout the semester. We might be checking in on content at one point, well-being at another, and combining several. Next, we need to choose the check-in tool. So what is the right tool that we can use based on our goals, based on the time that we have to devote to this, based on how we're planning to use the results, and based on the modality in which we teach. So as I mentioned, we're going to share 3 examples today in the webinar, and then we'll share many more with you in the publication. It's important to consider, what information will I get from the check-in tool? How much time will it take in class? And how will I analyze and use the results? Next, we want to make sure that we're supporting student participation. So one of the things we found in trying this out with our student was, we need to hear from all of our students for this to be effective, or as many as possible. If we post it on our Canvas page and the 5 top students give us feedback, we're going to get a much different perspective than if we hear from the vast majority of the class. So it's important that we're using a tool that allows for all voices to be heard and doesn't just get the voices from the students who are already actively participating all the time in the class. So it's important to consider, how I communicate the goal of the check-in to students, so letting them know why you're doing this. How will students participate in the check-in? Like logistically, like, are you going to have a QR code? They're going to do it on their phone? Do you have computers in class? How's it going to work? Is it online? Is it part of a module? Is it easy for students to participate? Is it necessary for participation to be incentivized? And if so, how will this occur? And then finally, it's important that we close the loop. So closing the loop is arguably the most important step in the check-in process, because it demonstrates to students that their instructor is listening to their feedback and cares about what they have to share. So we don't want to check in with our students and then let that information kind of just float away and they never hear from us again. We want to show them that we are listening when they check in, and when they know that, they're more willing to participate in future check-ins and give you honest feedback because they know they're being heard. A great side effect is that this also helps students feel like they belong in the class. They feel valued, they feel seen, they feel heard. So it kind of helps in multiple ways. It helps you gain information about your students, but it helps just the experience of having them be heard is going to help them feel more connected to the class. And then things to consider: how will I share the results of the check-in with my students? How will I celebrate student thinking and experience in my responses? Are there any outside resources I need to connect students with or bring into the classroom to support them? We had a lot of great discussions with our group about how to connect students to resources, bringing the resources to the classroom. When you see, for example, an overwhelming number of your students experiencing anxiety, you might bring someone to the class to speak about that. what changes, if any, will be made in response to the information. So this kind of 4-part cycle seems kind of intuitive, but it's important to really think about all of those steps when you're designing this check-in tool with your students. Okay, so I'm going to start by sharing the check-in tool that I have been using for the past couple of semesters. This is a weekly survey that I give my students. I teach Writing 1, which is just our freshman composition course, and I teach it with support. So it has a co-requisite support class. And so I give and it's a hybrid. So we meet once a week in person and the rest is done online. So I give students a weekly survey every week at the end of the in-person meeting for that week. My personal goals in doing a weekly survey are to ensure that students are learning the course content, to better understand how students experience my course, to provide an easy and flexible way for students to communicate with me each week in a formalized way, and to build classroom community. So the beauty of the weekly survey is that it's very flexible. I use Google Forms to create a survey every week, and I can add as many or as few questions as I want based on all of these different goals. So I can ask questions about course content. I can ask questions about student well-being. I can ask questions to help build classroom community. Like I said, very easy Google Forms. I typically end up asking about 3 to 5 questions each week, and I mix up what my different goals are in those questions. So here are just a list of sample questions that I've used. You can see there's kind of course content questions. So one important idea you learned in class, one muddy point that remains after a discussion, a question about an upcoming assignment. I have some community building questions. So share a shout out to a classmate who you think is doing a great job. Share a shout out to yourself for something you're doing well this semester. I've asked about their own feelings about their work in the class, something they're confident about, something they're worried about. I like to ask questions unrelated to the class as well. Share a bright spot in your week. Share one way you've grown as a student this semester. Questions that can help me as an instructor think about the ways I'm presenting the information. So share one way I can present information that you think would help you better understand the material. One thing you're enjoying about the class, or an idea you have about how I can help make the class more interesting or engaging for you or other students. And so just to clarify, I would never ask all of these questions in one week. I'm kind of picking and choosing as we go through the week from the different categories to help me get a well-rounded view of how my students are doing each week. So to support student participation, every week, because we are in a hybrid classroom, I work with a weekly PowerPoint. So we do a lot of work inside the PowerPoint where students are, kind of like we used to use posters back in the day. Now I'm using like Google Slides, and students are kind of filling out information on the slides. I use it for announcements. It's just the routine I've built in the class. So this slide screenshot you see here is at the end of every class. I use the same picture, the same format. The link is right there, so it looks exactly the same every week, so students get used to that routine. I do provide time in class for students to complete the survey, usually like 5 minutes. I mean, it's just the very end of class when we're kind of wrapping things up. I send a reminder after class if students didn't finish. I always follow up class with kind of announcements, and I always remind them to do the survey. I do give credit for completing the survey. It's a part of the co-requisite course. So I give them credit each week for doing the survey to show them that I'm valuing it. And like I said, it's part of the routine. So it's part of the end of class routine. And then I'll show you in a minute how it's part of the start of class for the next routine based on the information I get from the survey. And when I start class, I'm closing the loop to incentivize participation and show students they are being heard. So I've noticed that over the weeks, as students see that I take the information that they give me in the survey, and use it to start the following class, the answers get more involved because they know that I am reading them, I am using them, we are talking about them. And so I'm always seeing that feedback from them. Okay, so one of the ways I start out the semester is by doing a student information form, which is in effect the first survey of the semester. I send it to students before the class starts. And I send each student an individual email in response to their information survey. If you can see the first and the last paragraph, those are a copy and paste. I send those same first and last paragraph to every student. Just thanks for doing it. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to working with you. And then in the middle, I talk to them about something they said on the survey. So this student, I said, I saw that you said work, which may impact your work. I saw that you work, which may impact your work in this class. Where do you work? If you ever have any trouble meeting deadlines, remember it's always okay to ask for an extension, just making sure you communicate. And then I ask them a question about a book they're reading or a movie they're reading. I try to find, or a movie they've watched. I try to find something I can connect with them personally. So for this student, I said, I saw that you're reading the book Red, White, and Royal Blue. I keep seeing that book mentioned in book groups I'm in online. I'll have to check it out. I also saw you love to wear comfy clothes. Me too. So just making that little connection with my students before the semester starts. Later in the semester, if a student asks a specific question about an essay, I might email them individually. I saw your question in the week 5 survey. How often should I work on it before the due date? Once or twice a day. I copy that question so the student sees I'm reading their actual question, and then I answer it. I also take the muddy points that the students share about the work we're doing in class, and I begin the next class session by going over their muddy points. So I try to categorize them. We were reading about disconnection. And so I kind of try to categorize. We have questions about how did we become so disconnected, questions about true belonging. I have questions I can't answer, right? I'm unclear on some of the topics. I'm not sure about key ideas. And we talk about here what kinds of questions can be most helpful to you. These questions are not, I can't really answer those, but if you ask more specific questions, then I can. Some students share reading tips. They want reading tips. I always forget what I read. They share class tips. This student said I need to bring a sandwich, right? So that was his feedback on the class. Help me with time management. I always have a category called deep thoughts about life because they ask these questions that I can't really answer. There are people living alone in a snow forest. Do they belong anywhere? What has happened from when this book was published until now? So, and sometimes I can tell later in the semester that they're writing questions that they want to be in the deep thoughts about life category. They're very much trying to ask these kinds of questions. This one made me laugh. I need to bring a sandwich because the next week the student said, I brought a sandwich and I'm not so tired. So, seeing them, I can see how the answers change over the questions change over the first few weeks of the semester because they see me putting them in the PowerPoint. So they're asking very specific questions, referring to things that have happened in a previous week. I also use this opportunity to normalize struggle points in the classroom. If you look at this category here, reading struggles, I had 4 different students talk about the difficulty of the reading. And so I copied those word for word. All of chapter 4 was muddy to me. It was hard trying to find all these terms that didn't match up with the sections they were under. I think I just have to read the chapters over again. I think I need to reread some of chapter 4 today to understand the concepts of human longevity and social polarization. I think I have not fully understood the concepts so well, so I might go back and review again. So for them to see that 4 students said almost the exact same thing normalizes that idea that we might need to reread, right? We might need to go back. It's okay if you didn't understand it the first time through. That's happening for all of these students, and it's okay. I will also put, like, I asked students what they're worried about. This was when we were working on essay 3. So I just kind of listed all the things that people were worried about. So like, if you're also worried about that, that's okay. You're not alone. Everyone's worrying about these things in the essay. I use this to build classroom community. So I always have a question like the ones in the category of give your classmate a shout out. I've used, like I said, give yourself a shout out. So I copy all of those directly right into a slide so they can see what everybody in the class has said. I do suggest giving them a quick proofread in case someone says anything you maybe don't want on a slide. But it's great to have these here so they can see what they're saying about each other. This was a fun one. I said share tips for IVC students. So they each kind of shared, tips about parking, about the bunnies on campus. So this was a nice one for them to share with each other. I did one where I said, just vent about, I actually stole this one from Ryan, just vent about what's going on in your week. I didn't want to write exactly their words on this one, so I just kind of showed the categories things we're venting about. I loved the range, right? It was like toxic people, math class, slow internet. I love this one, time moves too fast, right? We have like a very wide range of things we're venting about, but it's a nice way to start class with that connection. As I was working on this presentation, I gave the last survey and I said, this is your last check-in survey of the semester. Sad, use this space to share anything you want to share. And I just wanted to share this one that I got from a student. He said, wait, what? This is the last check-in. Oh, I'm going to miss these. Why did you make this one so short? Well, when I started this class, I was worried. Historically, English and writing were always my weakest subjects in school. However, after taking this class, may have ended up being one of my favorite classes out of my whole first year of college. I remember choosing classes during the winter break, deciding what I was going to do and which professors I should pick. So I won't read the whole thing, but I wanted to show you that he loved the check-in, right? He wrote this much and just an open-ended, like that sentence that there was literally all I said, share anything you want to share. And he wrote this much. I could see that he knew it was going to be shared with his classmates. Hopefully I'll see you soon and some of my fellow classmates during the fall semester. You guys are epic. You should feel epic. I'll see you all around. So they see it as a conversation with me, with each other. And I just thought it was I thought it was great that this popped up when I was working on this because it was great feedback from this student. So that is my check-in survey. I am going to now pass it on to Rachel, who will talk about another check-in tool, strange choices, and then we will have time for questions at the end or in the chat. So I'm happy to answer those, and I will hand it over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Summer. So hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Polakoski, and I teach math at Cuyamaca College. I primarily teach statistics these days, and I tend to teach with a very interactive group learning classroom environment. So I'm going to tell you an activity that I do in my class every now and then. So Strange Choices is a check-in tool that I turn to. As I mentioned, it's a whole class activity, and it's something that I use anytime that I notice my students are exhibiting any sort of wide-scale self-sabotaging behaviors. So that could be things like not coming to class unprepared, not completing homework, or not doing test corrections or assignment redos. And I want to emphasize that this is something I use when it's a wide-scale problem, when I notice that there are a lot of students that are struggling with the same thing in the class and not just one or two students. If it's one or two students that aren't completing their homework, I'm going to triage with those one or two students one-on-one. But if it's half the class that's showing up unprepared, that's problematic for my lesson. So I'm going to talk about it with the whole class together. So I'm going to focus on not completing homework as the issue in my storytelling today, because that's the one that I tend to use this activity for the most. So the Strange Choices, the goals of this this activity is to provide space for peer-to-peer support in the class, learn about and help to eliminate barriers to success that students face, and to help students strategize ways to change self-sabotaging behaviors, such as not doing their homework. And so I have a lesson plan and a handout that are linked in the slides. The slides and this recording and everything are provided on the CAP website later, so you will have access to my materials to use. And the lesson plan and the handout just help me to facilitate that whole class conversation. And so I'm going to walk you through kind of what the activity entails. So supporting student participation. So this activity, what I start off with, the handout has a script with about 6 different scenarios where professors are kind of venting about things that they're noticing that their students are doing that they find strange. So here's an example of one. It says, how about this? Professor Egret said, I had a student last semester with a B average going into the final within 2 weeks. Then he disappeared. This semester, I ran into him on campus and I asked what happened. Oh, he said, I got burned out and stopped going to my classes. But you only had 2 more weeks to go. You threw away 14 weeks of work, I said. You know what he did? He shrugged his shoulders and walked away. I wanted to shake him and say, what's wrong with you? I know that I've had that experience with students in my own classes where they've disappeared at the end of the semester after working so hard all semester long. And I think, oh my gosh, that's such a strange choice that the students are making. And so that's just one of the scenarios in the handout. As I mentioned, there's a couple more. But I have student volunteers come up to the front of the class and kind of role play and act out as if they are these professors as they read the script that I have. And then after that is kind of done, I have students rank on the handout what they find to be the most strange out of the scenarios that are described. And then I'll have them kind of talk with a group mate about what was their number one choice, and their group mate will share, and we kind of have a conversation about, was there something that the whole class thought was the most strange? And this is just kind of setting the stage for what I want to talk about, because what might seem strange to a professor is oftentimes something that makes complete sense to the student. So like, even with this example that I provided here, students are like, oh yeah, no, I know someone who's done that, or I've done that myself, where they just kind of disappear after working so hard. And so I'm trying to get at like, what's the motivation and the rationale behind the strange choice? So once we've had that kind of conversation about strange choices that students make and why they might be making it, now I'm relating that role-playing activity to my own experience with my students in this class. So I say, as your professor, I'm noticing that there's some strange choices and I need your help with it, because I noticed that half of the class didn't complete their homework that was due last night. And I'm sitting here and, I know that completing your homework not only kind of helps your grade, right? Because you're not getting a 0 on your homework, but it also helps prepare you for class today. And it's leading up to our upcoming, exam or assessment. And to me, it's a strange choice that so many of the class didn't complete the homework. And so I need your help understanding that. So I have students get into groups. And it's very important that you're genuine at this point, and you also need to be open to student feedback for them to provide their honest, reasons as to why the homework isn't getting done. A little side note, if you're a stats teacher like myself, sometimes I'll weave in some data into the lesson plan and do a little correlation between homework completion and test scores, just kind of weave that into the lesson plan. So I have my students get into small groups and I ask them the prompt, what are some reasons that students in the class may not have completed the homework? Maybe they ran out of time, they had internet issues, got stuck on something. I want you all to just make a list. And so I give my students some time to make a list. Afterwards, I bring it back and have them write all of the reasons on the board. So we've got all of the possible reasons why students may not have done their homework last night. And then I try to honor the cultural wealth that the students bring to the classroom by acknowledging that there were some students that did get their homework done. So, given that so many students did complete the homework, clearly there are some strategies that people are aware of in the class and some tips that we can provide. So I want you to look at this long list of, reasons why students struggled to get the homework done, and let's come up with some tips or some solutions to help these students get past, the barriers they're facing. So I give the students again some more time to talk in their groups, and then again we have a whole class conversation. And students have great tips for getting things done. And one of the reasons why I like having them come up with the tips is that I'm not standing there lecturing at them like, well, you need better time management skills. They know that. They need to hear from their peers. What are their peers doing that's working for them? So some things that I've had students come up with in the past was they work on their homework right after class while it's fresh in their brain, and they'll go out to the tutoring center. And when students have shared that in the past, the next week or so, I noticed that there's more students from my class that join them in that little tutoring session. Other students talk about making regularly scheduled tutoring appointments each week, setting aside blocks on the calendar, using the Canvas app, so that way when they're sitting waiting for a doctor's appointment or in line at the grocery store, they can do a couple of things on their phone. So it's a great opportunity. One of my goals for this is that peer-to-peer support. And so this provides that kind of time for peers to share what works for them. So closing the loop, you really need to interrogate your own rationale for things, because you will want to try and implement student suggested changes when it's possible or appropriate. When I've done this in the past, one of the things that came up the very first time I did this activity with my students was that the day and time of my due dates didn't work for them. And I had it set for, I think, like Sunday at midnight was the deadline to turn in their work. And we met Monday mornings at 8 a.m. with class. And they said, I really need until 8 a.m. I'm working on it at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. And that's a barrier that students are facing. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not looking at their work at 12:01 in the morning to see what they've done. So I don't see a big deal with extending the due date. What's important to me is that they get it done before they come to class, so they come to class prepared. And so I changed my due date and I said, I'll make you a deal. How about 7:45 a.m. so you're not late to class because you were finishing up that last bit of the assignment, So that was something that I could change that would help them out. And if there are things that you are not willing to change, talk about the why. Provide the why if you're not willing to change something. So for example, students wanted me to kind of eliminate one of the assignments because they thought it was just too much. And I said, okay, here's why I can't eliminate it. Completing this low stakes assignment is important to this higher stakes assignment that we have later on. And so this is your chance to practice and to get feedback from me and your peers before you do something similar later. And so it's really important to me that you do this assignment, and that's why I'm not going to get rid of it, because it will help your understanding before we do a kind of larger, more summative assessment later. So providing that rationale can help the students kind of understand that you're not just assigning work because it's busy work. And then another way that I close the loop is that when the next kind of big deadline is approaching and there's maybe something coming up that I want to make sure they do before they come to class, I'll remind them of the conversations we had in class and the strategies that we came up with. Oftentimes after I do the Strange Choices activity, I'll take a picture of what's on the board, and then I'll just put that picture into a slideshow later when I'm like, yeah, here's all the things that your classmates suggested. Have any of you tried these? How's it going for you? Does anyone want to share any new tips or tricks that they've discovered in the last couple of weeks that's helped them get their homework done? And that's kind of another way to close the loop, in that I'm reminding them that, hey, we've got this deadline coming up again. Let's not repeat the same mistakes we made before and try some of these new things. And so that's my Strange Choices activity.
Thank you so much, Rachel. As we were getting ready for this webinar, some of us were sharing that we've talked about this activity with other colleagues, and everyone's like, I want to try that, because it's such it's just such a great way to approach that inquiry with our students. So thank you for sharing that, Rachel.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass it on to Ryan.
Hi, folks. I'm Ryan Sullivan, English faculty at Mount San Jacinto College, and I'm going to talk about less formal check-ins and off-topic check-ins as a means to kind of build community in your classroom and open up the feedback loop so that you're constantly getting the feedback you need. So one of the first things to think about here is, I know that when we talk about these things, one of the things that might be on your mind is, am I going to really spend this much class time doing X, Y, or Z? And I think it's important to keep in mind, primarily I teach in-person English classes, English 101, 103, which are our composition sequence. So mine's kind of more focused on the in-person classroom, which if you are back in person, you're seeing that sometimes attendance can be a little bit spotty, especially now that we're out of the pandemic. And so when you think about the class time that you need to implement something like this, I think it's important to keep in mind that we can have the best PowerPoint, the best lecture, the best planned thing possible. But then if those desks are empty, or if a student is mentally or emotionally checked out, they're still not going to learn it. And so getting the content is that really important building block, but the surrounding environment is also important to making sure that they're able to process the information. And so building community in your classroom can allow for feedback, for informal checking in that allows your students to feel more comfortable coming to class, participating in class, asking each other for help. I have it often where students, halfway through, you have those times when someone will disappear and someone else in the class will be like, I'm going to text them because they were supposed to be here. Or I can be like, hey, aren't you friends with so-and-so? Can you text them, etc. And students are better at reaching out to other students than I am sometimes, right? I'm limited to certain kinds of email or whatever systems we have, but they have group texts, they have threads, they have the ability to reach out to each other in ways that I don't have. So it's about leveraging that student power, but also for me, it's also a lot about mental health, because let's face it, sometimes we get frustrated. Sometimes we can get in that place being like, nobody cares about my class. And if we're finding out what's actually going on, we learn like it actually has nothing to do with my class. It's just these things are going on right now, etc. So I want to show you a little bit about what this looks like in my classroom. So when I start the semester, I feel it's really important to get to know all of my students' names, but also have them get to know each other. And this is partially selfish. So what I do on day one is I go around the room a couple of times and get names until I've learned most of the names. And then I go through a thing where I say their names individually. I purposefully, and also not purposefully, make some mistakes and ask those students, what's the first letter of your name? Or ask them for their names so that I'm getting and learning their names, because then I have my students do it too. And they're all then within that first week speaking in class in a way that's not really threatening. It's not asking them to divulge much information. It's literally just about names. And if they make mistakes, it allows it to be a low stakes kind of soft mistake where they get to correct each other and everyone's making a mistake together. And so it starts us off in this zone where we know each other, but also then I'm hearing their names a bunch of times and I will remember them forever at that point. And then for the first several weeks, rather than having them do group discussions or group work in one group for, let's say, 3 discussion questions, I make a point to randomize it for every single question. So they're moving around into different groups a lot, but they're meeting people and getting names and information that way. So in the first couple of weeks, you kind of break that ice so they get to know each other. And we can go to the next slide. Once you've set that tone, then I like to reinforce by constantly checking in. And so what we do, this was stolen from one of my professors. I was a super quiet person in undergrad, but one of my professors that I had several times, Judy, would always ask us to announce our presence at the beginning of class. And what she meant by that was go around, say your name, and say something. So every class, we start by students saying their name. Again, I'm learning names and reinforcing that. They're learning each other's names, reinforcing that, and that builds some kind of community in and of itself. But also we do a question that is sometimes school related, but often not. So it can be, in day 2, it can be, how was your first week? How has your first week been going? Are there things that you might be confused about with the campus that I can help with? Things like that. But then we can quickly move into things like, this was actually one I found on Instagram and shared with Summer, which is share a boring fact about yourself, because interesting facts are hard to come up with, but boring facts are kind of easy. And then my students' personal favorite is that they get 30 seconds to just complain and vent and rant about something. And the nice thing is it gets it out of their brain, right? Like maybe they've been stewing on, often it's sibling related. I see that a lot, sibling related, or someone cut them off on their way to campus or something. And so they get 30 seconds to vent, and then it's out of their brain. They're more focused, they're engaged in the classroom. And we can also have like, it's sometimes funny, we can joke with each other. It builds that community. And actually, this one is requested a lot, or the share a win of this for this week. I had a student just 2 weeks ago ask if we could do that one, because she was really excited to share with the class that she was pregnant. And so she really wanted her classmates to know. So we did that one. And so you start getting these kind of like, or, students will also be like, I need to vent this week. Can we do event one? They get really engaged in it. But the idea here is even the quietest student, if we're like, how is your week going? They can say, it's good so far. Something very short, something that's not very threatening. They don't have to volunteer much information, but it gives them a chance to say something in class, because as a former quiet person, I know the longer you wait, the harder it is to say something. And so it helps them get there. And so once we have this kind of continual checking in, like every day, everyone's kind of comfortable enough that after an assignment or a reading, I can do a debrief and be like, okay, honest feedback. How did that go for you? Should I teach this again in the next semester? Did this not work for you? And they're okay with saying like, yeah, that wasn't very good. Or no, it was good, but X, Y, or Z. And additionally, once I've graded their papers, I'll often do a thing where I have them in groups working on something, and I'll bring them up one-on-one and just do a 20-second conversation with them. Like, here are the big things I noticed. What questions do you have? And even that 20-second conversation, while other people are doing other things, allows you to build that relationship with the students so that they will come up and ask you questions. And we can go to the next slide. So this also, so one of the other things that we can sometimes forget about is it's important to let our students check in with each other and not just us, right? And so in those group times that they're working together or whatever, I will often let it go a few minutes longer than it needs to, right? We all know that time where there's the tipping point where then the conversation gets off topic, and I usually will let it go past that tipping point, because maybe they're talking about shoes or cars or venting about work. That builds those connections, which then later on, when they might be missing class, someone else can reach out to them. Or they're more likely to be like, I'm going to go to class because I'm going to see these people. They're in it together. They're seeing that there's other individuals going through the same things they are. And then also I'll jump into those conversations sometimes too. Like I will give my feedback, or I'll be like, I was just overhearing this. What are you all talking about? And then I'll jump into it for a minute or two. And the thing that does is it helps eliminate the distance between you and your students, so they're okay with sharing things. Like I had a student a couple weeks ago who asked to speak outside because her father was put in prison, and so she's struggling to get things together. That's not an easy thing to talk about or ask a professor, but we've created that rapport so she felt comfortable asking those things, and then we can act accordingly. And so it allows you to create moments for genuine care, so you can help them through obstacles. And also in the mental health side, if I know that I'm missing like 7 students today, but I also know that these 2 are going through divorces and having issues with this. This one's father is in prison right now. This one is out sick for X, Y, or Z reason. I can start seeing like, okay, it's not me. It's not just about what I'm doing. Life is happening too. And it helps remind you that we don't need to always take it personally. It helps you figure out too, when it is personal, when it is the assignment or your policy or practice, versus like, in week 12, everyone's doing midterms and they're tired. So when we do a check-in that says like, how are you feeling today? And everyone's just like, I'm tired, I have midterms. You can remember, okay, maybe I need to like redo something or slow down the pace for a second and let them breathe and things like that. We can go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. It's so just to close, I thought I was at the end, or I thought I was not there yet. Okay, perfect. So allowing that opportunity for genuine care, you can help them tackle the issues that arise. They're less likely to just disappear without telling you anything, right? Because as Rachel showed in that strange choices, that's one of the things that is really frustrating as instructors is like, no, you can pass, and then they just disappear. So this is more likely to keep them attending class, turning in work, or at least keeping you in the loop so that you can do something about it, so they don't just opt out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I love how you kind of started off a little more formal with everybody talking to make those connections and leads to that kind of feeling in your classroom that allows them to open up. So in doing this over the past semester, we kind of thought about the importance of entering into things like this that might be new for us, that might be vulnerable for us, we might hear things from our students that don't make us feel the best, the value in doing that together. So what we did was kind of create, at the end of the article that we'll be sharing, we created kind of a template for a community of practice that you might create on your own campus to begin this process of checking in with your students and doing it together in a way where you can share what you heard from your students. You can brainstorm ideas about how to respond to that feedback. One of the things we talked about is the importance of creating norms when you start out with a community of practice. If you're doing a community of practice, there's a few ways to go about this. You as a facilitator can say, these are the norms, right? You can work together to create norms for your group, or a combination of both. Some you're gonna set from the beginning, and then others that you will create together. So these were kind of the ones suggested by the group we were working with. We're here to improve student experience in our classrooms with the goal of improving equitable completion. To achieve this goal, we're meeting in the spirit of inquiry and continuous improvement. We are not here to complain about our students. We are here to be brave and try new things in our classroom with the goal of improving the student experience. And we are working toward these goals by collaborating with other instructors and sharing expertise, experience, and ideas. So these kind of helped set the tone for our conversations and might be helpful to you if you're choosing to start a community of practice. So the goals that we kind of came to for this community of practice were to build a practice of checking in with our students, to monitor student experience and learning, to explore practices to support improved student experiences and learning based on our survey findings, and to reflect on results of classroom interventions to improve student experience in current and future semesters. So we came up with a kind of very broad outline of a 4-meeting community of practice. And in the article, we have kind of a more detailed outline, but this is just kind of the overview of the way you might structure meetings if you were going to try this on your own campus. So the first meeting would need to come very early in the semester, maybe during like a flex week. And the goal would be to set up or to build community within your community of practice and create your plan for checking in. And this could look different ways. You might all be trying the same check-in tool. You might all be choosing your own check-in tool. You might be sharing goals. You might each come up with individual goals, but kind of just setting up that beginning stage of what am I trying to learn from my students and how am I going to learn that? What's that tool I'm going to use? The second meeting can come somewhere in the middle of the semester after you have already started that check-in process. Here you can share reflections on information gathered using the check-in tool. This is a great time to brainstorm. My students said this. What do I do with this information? You know, we have a wealth of knowledge with the other instructors that we can talk with and share what we're learning and brainstorm approaches. I know I learned a lot from working with the instructors this semester. Near the end of the semester, we can have some reflection time, right? Reflecting on the ways in which checking in with students has impacted the classroom experience and performance. What did we learn about ourselves as teachers? What did we learn about students, our students? What might we change in the future? So the last meeting maybe would be after the end of the semester when it's all kind of said and done, because inevitably we're going to learn things that we might want to change from the start, right? So we're learning things about our current students, but we're also learning things about ourselves as instructors and what we might change from the beginning. So maybe that's a change in a syllabus policy. Maybe that's a change in how we approach the beginning of the semester, the community building we do early on. So what did we learn from this semester that we might carry on into the next semester? So again, this is just a very broad outline in case you were interested in doing this to help you kind of think through how you might set up these meetings. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share. And I know Rebecca was kind of keeping an eye on the chat for questions. Rebecca, were there any you wanted to flag for us?
Yeah, I flagged a few questions. I have a couple questions for all presenters and then a couple that specifically came up for you, Summer. So I think we'll start maybe with the ones for everyone first. And the first question is, have you tried these strategies in online courses? And if so, do you get more participation by posting surveys to Canvas or pushing it to their phones via something like Pronto? Given the silence, I'm going to say that many of our presenters have not tried this in like an asynchronous capacity. I can share.
I can add.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I did not. I taught a hybrid with synchronous Zoom and an asynchronous component. I did use the surveys, but I did not do them weekly when we were online. I did them like 3 times a semester and made them a little bit longer. I made them an assignment, so they were within the module for that week. And as I do now, I gave points. I made it an assignment for the support class. So it was just a part of their kind of weekly work to work through the module. And then Rebecca, did you want to share what you've done?
Yeah, I've just done something similar where I do it asynchronously at the end of every week, where I ask them to tell me one key takeaway and one sort of muddy point, and so that I can go back and address it the next week if I see there's a whole bunch of people confused by the same thing. I've never used Pronto. That's a relatively new tool to our school though, so I know they just added it within the last couple of years to our Canvas so that we could. So I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody else has used it. And then Rachel or Ryan, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say that I have not used the Strange Choices activities within asynchronous class, but as more and more people are learning about it, I'm hearing ideas of how to adapt it into, maybe a short survey for the students ranking the various scenarios, and then some discussion boards for students to engage in those conversations about the strange choices. But I'm excited for you all to try it asynchronously and give me your tips and tricks.
Yeah, I mostly teach in person or in Zoom formats, but I do know that several of my colleagues do things like they'll post a random announcement sometimes and have students comment on it. Or in one of my online classes, I'll post like a weekly or bi-weekly recommendations of just random things that I've liked that week. Just anything like that that kind of breaks that formal barrier can really help with students, I think. So announcements are a great way, and also, of course, reaching out via email or discussion boards.
Thank you. So another question that came in is, does anyone use tools like Starfish or other early alert in conjunction with your own sort of check-in strategies?
I don't, but we are working on an embedded counselor program at our college. And so I think that would be a great way to kind of weave in some support, having a dedicated counselor for a class and being able to share information, because sometimes I do feel like I'm not sure I can help with this, and I know there's resources on campus and I try my best to connect students with those, but I think having that kind of outside support of a counselor will be super helpful.
Great.
Just similarly to what Summer said, is you get that feedback, like, this life thing is happening or whatever. I typically will direct them to the offices myself. I'll usually do a warm handoff, walk over, or email connection. But I think easily the things that we can't necessarily take them to, or early alert, things like.
Oh, you just muted yourself, Ryan.
Oh, I'm good. I'm done. Sorry.
Okay. And then we have just a couple sort of technical questions for how you run your surveys, Summer. And I tried to answer them in the chat, but just in case I didn't answer them correctly, I wanted Summer to answer them for us also. So the first question is, how much credit do students receive?
It's 10 points, which is just like what the equivalent to a small assignment, right? And for that class, it's pass, no pass. And so it's really just like, are you regularly doing the things? It's not going to ruin their grade if they miss a survey at all. If they didn't do any surveys for the whole semester, it might impact their grade a little. It's really hardly anything, but it just gives it that weight of being an assignment that gets credit.
Yeah, and just for anyone who maybe either missed it in the chat or needs clarification, we have a writing class with a 2-unit co-rec. So when Summer says it's pass, no pass, she's talking about the co-rec class, yes, not the core writing
yes.
class.
Thank you.
And then the Google Slides are accessible to the students so that they can get the survey link on the phones.
Yeah, the slides are accessible. The survey link is in multiple places. It's in the slides, it's in the weekly module, it's on the Canvas homepage. I usually send it in an announcement as well following class. So it's everywhere. And yeah, they can easily do it on their phone.
And then the last question is how you organize your Google Forms. And I think this is sort of a behind the scenes kind of question. Mm-hmm. Do you have a folder for each class? When the semester is over, then what do you do with them?
Yeah, I make a folder, and then I have every week, I have the survey, and then I have the, what's it called? The spreadsheet that it creates that you read from. And so every week has a survey and a spreadsheet. I just have them in a folder. And then when the semester's over, I pop them in a previous semester folder. And then usually I create a new survey every week, but I have found that sometimes I'll go back and be like, what was I asking in week 14 last time, and see if I had any brilliant ideas that I want to bring back this semester. So I just have them there for reference. I did want to see, I couldn't answer the chat because I was doing the PowerPoint, but I did see the question about emailing every student every week. Absolutely not. That is like definitely no. I do that at the very beginning of the semester for a very specific purpose, to build that email connection, to show them I'm reading the survey. It's not so bad because I send it out like a week before the semester starts, and a couple trickle in kind of every day. So I just do that. And like I said, it's a template. I'm really only writing those 1 or 2 paragraphs in the middle for each student. The other times I do an individual email, student has a question that I want to answer specifically, but most of the time I do it as a whole class check-in.
Thank you.
Or whole class closing the loop, sorry.
And then a final question is, has anyone tried the check-ins in ESL classes? And none of us are in, or at least of our presenters are ESL instructors. So if you're an ESL instructor and have, please feel free to jump in and share your experiences in the chat, or if you're willing to raise your hand right now and do so.
I can add 2 really quick. The class I teach now, I wrote with Rebecca Beck, who teaches, it's the same writing 1 freshman comp class, but the co-rec is ESL, so it's designated for ESL students. And we built in the surveys, not the weekly ones, but the 3 or 4 times a semester, we did build those into the class, so she was using them as well.
Perfect. And unless I missed something, I think that's all the questions.
Okay, well, thank you for monitoring that. Super helpful. And thank you all for being here. We did record. We will be posting this on the CAP website in the next few days. I will send out a link to everyone who was registered, so be on the lookout for that in the next few days. I hope you all have a great end of your semester. Thank you all for joining us at this very busy time. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you to Rebecca. I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you. Have a great day.